Hello everyone, Helen here. How are you doing? I hope you're okay, and thanks for stopping by to come and spend a little bit of your time with me today. And in this podcast this week, I've got a couple of finished projects to share with you. I've got my first ever attempt at making a basket to tell you all about, and a little bit of an autumnal feel later on, and we're going into the kitchen at the end as well. So usual variety of things to chat to you about. So let's get straight on with it. And first of all, a finished project. Well, this project, I am so glad that it's finished at last. I bought the yarn for it in February this year, so that's not so long ago when I think about some of the stash that I've got, but yes. Anyway, I bought it in February when I was in Aberdeen, a lovely wool shop there, when I was meeting up with my friend Margaret in Aberdeen. We had a lovely time then, and I started knitting a pair of socks with the yarn that I bought, or with one of the balls of yarn that I bought, and probably not much after I got back from Aberdeen, probably March I started them. And then, I just kept putting off getting on with them, really. And eventually I did finish one sock and make a start on the next sock. Probably I did that in the summer, and I'd done the cuff. And I think it was that I just wasn't enjoying the pattern. I don't know why. Here's the socks. They're lovely socks. They're called the Impressive Socks, and they're by Winwick Mum. And they're not difficult, but the vast majority of the socks that I make are just plain ones, plain socks, because usually I get self-striping yarn or variegated of some sort, and I just like seeing the pattern, and I don't see any point in putting an extra pattern into that kind of yarn. But this yarn being just a plain colour, I thought it would be nice to have a pattern in. And it's just a simple, the panel with the pattern in it is just a simple twist of a couple of stitches. And yeah, I mean, it isn't hard, but I just really didn't enjoy doing it. And I love the finished socks. They're really nice. And as ever, it was a pattern where I started with the cuff, finishing at the toe, and yeah, I don't know what it was about it, but I love the finished socks. They are a gift for somebody, they're not actually for me. I love the fluffiness. It's quite a dense fabric that the yarn is made. Did I say what yarn I was using? No. It's Superba alpaca sock yarn. And yeah, it's just gorgeous. It's not just a solid colour, actually. It's a bit sort of mottled, and yeah, they are nice. I'm so glad that I've only just got them finished. What was it? November. I started them in March. And because I've had those on the go for so long, it's meant that I haven't knitted any other socks this year. And normally I knit a few pairs of socks and put them away ready to give to those members of my family or friends who really appreciate hand-knitted socks. And I haven't got any at all. This is the first one to go into my box of socks. So I'm going to have a bit of a frantic knitting time in the next, not very long now, actually. Yeah, in the next month anyway, to try and knit. I would like to knit 3 pairs of socks. I have made a start on one, which I've forgotten to bring up with me. But they're using the West Yorkshire Spinners Christmas yarn that I think they brought out last year. It's not this year's. And so I have made a start on those. But I want to try and get 2 more pairs. So I think it means a bit less animal knitting for a little while. However, I have finished the duck, and I showed you last time that the duck I'd finished the knitting of the duck. She'd just been blocked, she was still a bit damp. So she is now stuffed, she's complete. If you've seen on Instagram, you've already seen her. And here she is. And after a great dilemma of trying to decide what to call her, and I asked on Instagram for ideas, and there were loads of lovely ideas. But when I actually took her out for a walk, all of a sudden I picked her out of my bag and I thought, oh, Gabriella, that's what you're called. And I know it's silly to say that, oh, the duck whispered the name in my ear, but it feels like that. Suddenly, sometimes the name just comes to me, and it did, didn't it? You just told me your name. Yeah, she thought all those other names were really beautiful, but her name is actually Gabriella. And yeah, so what can I say? I did say a little bit last time about the knitting the wings and the tail feathers and things. The tail feathers were the fiddliest part, actually, but otherwise it wasn't too bad. But I think I forgot to say last time that one reason why I hadn't knitted the duck sooner than I did was because I was just put off by the cast on for the start, because you start at the end of the beak and then you knit the beak and then into the head, as usual with Cinthia Vallet's patterns. It is knitted seamless, and you just knit it all in one. And I was just really put off by doing the Turkish cast on because I thought I'd not done one before. But in fact, when I started doing it, I realised I had done it once before, but on much thicker needles with thicker yarn. I made a toe-up Christmas stocking a couple of years ago. And yeah, I used a Turkish cast on for that. So it was a little bit familiar when I got going. But it was much, much harder doing it on 2mm needles rather than, I don't know what I used before, 5 or 6mm needles I used when I did the Christmas stocking. Anyway, I managed it. I did have to have a few attempts. I have to say I didn't get it right first time. And I think partly it was just the fiddliness of having such thin needles, and and I'm not always good at following directions of saying the yarn has to come from this side or that side. So anyway, I worked it out in the end, and it was fine. And I think the other tricky thing that I found about the duck was actually sewing on this mouth, her smile. This is my third attempt, and it's still not absolutely perfect, but she has got a nice expression. That's the most important thing about toys that you make, is to make sure you do like their expression. So yes, third attempt. I kept doing it and thinking, nah, it's not right. And so, but it was quite tricky. You'd think it was easy to make it look okay because of the line of your knitted stitches, but no, it wasn't. It was quite hard to get this curve of the smile exactly right. But anyway, you're all right. You're all right now. You've got a nice expression. So she was finished, and then of course I had to make her a little dress, and obviously it has to be a particular style of dress to fit the shape of the duck, which is quite cute, kind of a tunic dress. I love the colours that I chose. I think they work out very nicely, but I'm not really very happy with how I've knitted it. It just looks a little bit untidy where I've done the colour change, and I did the colour change exactly as it said in the pattern, which was an unusual way of changing the colours. I can't really describe it exactly, but you can see each time it's a little bit thicker, and it's not neat. It really isn't neat, so I'm not so happy with that, but Gabriella doesn't mind. She's very happy with her dress. So I think that's her dress. But honestly, I love, almost as much as I love the duck, I love her knitting basket. Because in the Mouche and Friends book that the pattern came from, then there's a little story about each animal, as you might have heard me tell you once before. And in the book it says that this duck, who actually in the book is called Nana duck. Nana is a word, certainly in the region that I live, that means grandma. So I definitely didn't want to call her Nana duck. Anyway, so she is a knitter, and she was introduced to knitting when she'd laid her eggs, and she was very, very fidgety. And one of her friends came along and said, well, what you need to do is to learn to knit. And as soon as she'd learned to knit, she was quite happy sitting there on her eggs until they hatched. So in Mouche and Friends, there's a little knitting basket to knit, which is not surprisingly done in that kind of basket weave pattern. And of course I had to fill it with some little balls of yarn and a set of double pointed needles, and which are actually toothpicks, and cocktail sticks were a bit long. I could have cut the cocktail sticks down, but I found these toothpicks, so they're sitting in the basket as well. And I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. It just looks so beautiful. And so I did just make tiny little balls of the colours that I used for the dress. So there we go, finished duck and knitting basket. And Gabriella is getting quite broody, and she is hoping that at some point she will have ducklings, maybe a couple of ducklings. So I think that those are going to be my next project. But as I've already said, I've got a bit of Christmas gift knitting to do at the moment. So we'll see how long I resist not starting another one. So that's it. So, basket making. Well, I've been wanting to have a go at basket making for absolutely ages. And my yoga teacher is also an amazing basket maker and does do courses every now and then. And I'd kept an eye out for when she was doing a course, and I'd never been able to find a date that was okay for me until recently. So I signed up for basket making one day workshop and went along, and it was held in a place in Durham called Abundant Earth. It's a sort of workers' cooperative, really. They have about 1/2 acre of land where they grow vegetables and things, and so they have a veg bag scheme, and so I get a veg bag every week. I never know what's going to be in it, but grown, pretty locally to me. And but they also run courses on their Abundant Earth site. They've got a big wooden cabin where they can sort of fit, I don't know, usually about 8 people. I think we're 8 people doing my basket course. And it's just lovely. It's in a beautiful setting, and there's a few sheep roaming around, lovely views across the valley, and it's just a nice place to go to. And so here is my basket. I did actually successfully make, what's attached to itself? There we go. So here we go. And obviously, if you followed me on Instagram, you will have already seen some photos of this. Now, it doesn't bear too close an inspection, in fact, not at all, because it isn't the neatest thing ever. But it was my first effort. I have to just, be kind to myself that I actually had a go at doing something completely new to me. While I was doing the workshop for the day, I didn't really want to start videoing things. It would have felt a bit intrusive to other people and things, but I did take a few photos to document the process of making the basket. So I'll kind of talk you through how I made the basket. So the first thing we had to do was to make 2 circles. First of all, you just use 2 pieces of thick willow, and this willow had been grown by Jo. She just grows her own willow, and the willow that we used for this basket was harvested about, she said, well, nearly a year ago it was harvested, and then she dries it, and then about a week before we were due to make these baskets, she then soaked it in water so it was nice and damp, and it makes it obviously more pliable and easier to bend, although I have to say it's not all that easy to bend a willow, but I think, if I hone my technique a bit, I'll find it a bit easier. But anyway, so you have to start off by having some thickish pieces of the willow, and you make 2 circles, roughly the same size. They didn't have to be exactly the same size. And I think I used about 4 pieces of willow, 4 or 5 pieces of willow in one of my circles, and I think 3 or 4 in the other one. And you just loop them around, and if bits stick out, it doesn't matter. You can just snip them off later. So as long as they're holding themselves together, it's okay. And then the next thing we had to do was to put one circle inside the other, and we had to find a thinner piece of willow to attach the 2 circles together, and then do a special little weaving stitch, which I didn't get quite right, to fasten them together. And you just tuck the end of the willow in, and then it was time to start the weaving of the basket. And so you start at one of the handles, one of the places where the handle joins the rim, and so it is just weaving it in and out, and it wasn't too difficult to start off with. It was quite hard work on the hands, I have to say, and the next day my hands were a bit sore and achy. So you do a bit of weaving on one side and then a bit of weaving on the other side. Then you have to put in some extra struts that you're going to weave around. They just poke into the first bit of weaving that you do. And then it's just a case of, starting weaving in and out as you do with weaving, and doing a bit of one side and then doing a bit of the other side. And when I got a little bit further on, I had to add an extra couple of bits of thicker willow, just because the gap was going to be too big between the in and outs. And and the hardest part of all was the very last thin section, because you're working from each side and then you end up with this gap in the middle, and it's even harder to weave in and out for that bit. And then finally I just chose some different coloured willows, because most of the willow I used for the basket part, you can see, is this reddish colour. But I then wrapped some willow around the handle, and I chose some different colours so it looked a little bit stripy there. But, well, I'm just so proud of myself for making this, and I'm just trying to look at the imperfections and say to myself, it was the first time I did it. So there's places where there's kinks in the willow that shouldn't be there. It should be a bit more neat, wrapped around the rim. But it is quite tricky bending. I think you just need lots of practice, as with lots of things. You need lots of practice in just manipulating the pieces of willow. And so there we go. I'm so pleased with it. And I've already taken a photo of all of the Mouche and Friends in the basket, and I think it's going to have all sorts of uses, actually. I don't think the Mouche and Friends animals are going to live in it permanently. It's going to have all kinds of uses, so I'm looking forwards to having this basket in my life. And I think I would do another basket making course as well, to, I wouldn't even mind having another go at this type to see if I can do a bit of a better job, or learning to do another kind of basket. But anyway, it was a great success for my first ever time. Put that down there. Okay then, well, I've just come back from another camper van trip. We've had half-term holidays here in England, and we went away for a few days in the camper van. We went to the Yorkshire Dales, and it hadn't been that long since we were in the Yorkshire Dales, because when I went to Yarndale, we went for just an overnight stay. But we decided after we came back that we must go back again as soon as we could to the Yorkshire Dales, because there were so many things that we realised that we'd like to do. So we went back, and I will be making a podcast or two about that trip. But I thought I would just give you a little bit of a taster, especially as some of the things that I realised that I had on video and photos were quite seasonal. And I think by the time I've got around to making like the travel vlog part of it, it's probably be January, I should think. Anyway, so I thought I wanted to use these little bits of videos and photos. And so I'm going to show you just a little video that I made of some of the things that I saw that are just very seasonal. So one of the places that you just saw in the video there that we visited and had a lovely time there was the city of Ripon. And it was a horrible rainy day, but it didn't really matter. We had a lovely time at the cathedral, and then we went to a museum in the afternoon. And in the museum, I learned lots of new things actually, but I learned about something new that I'd never heard of before, and that was a procession that Ripon has every year, round about the end of July, beginning of August, called the St Wilfrid's procession. And St Wilfrid was the founder of Ripon Cathedral in the 7th century. He was the one who was there when the cathedral was being built. And so after his death, people decided they wanted to remember him. And in fact, I think it was in 1108 that things really kicked off, because Henry I granted a charter to Ripon to have an annual fair. And so that's when the people of Ripon decided that it would be a fair dedicated to St Wilfrid. So they have this procession, and still have this procession every single year, apart from a couple of years recently. We'll not say why, I'm sure you can guess, where they couldn't have the procession. But otherwise it's been going on since 1108. And one of the traditions, apart from, they would the head of the procession would be a horse, and it would have an effigy of St Wilfrid on it, and that would lead the procession through the town. And one of the traditions of the procession was that people would make something called Wilfra cakes. Wilfra or Wilfrid, they were called Wilfra cakes. And they would bake them for the procession day, and they would leave them on windowsills or doorsteps so that passers-by could just help themselves. And that tradition apparently went on for quite a long time, but eventually it died out. And very recently, I think only last year, I'm not quite sure, the Ripon museums decided they would try and revive that tradition. And it was when we were visiting the Ripon Workhouse Museum that afternoon that there was some information on the wall about it and a recipe. So I thought, ooh, that looks good. I'm going to have to try that. So that's what I'm going to show you in a moment. And basically, a Wilfra cake is not a cake at all. It's much more like an apple turnover, but with the added ingredient of cheese, because certainly in Yorkshire and probably lots of other places as well, quite often people like having cheese with apples. In fact, there's a saying that says, an apple without cheese is like a kiss without a squeeze. So anyway, so cheese and apples do go well together. And also cheese and fruitcake is another common thing. And these Wilfra cakes use Wensleydale cheese in them. And that was another thing that we did when we were on our camper van trip. We went to the Wensleydale cheese factory as well. So I'll look forward to telling you about that another time. So this recipe is basically like it's pastry and a filling of apples and sugar and cheese. And it's absolutely delicious. I really, really, definitely will make this recipe again. It wasn't difficult, and I thought you might fancy it too. So let's go into the kitchen. So I will leave a link to the recipe in the description box below. I'll just leave a link to the Ripon Museum's website where I got the recipe from, and you might like to give it a go. And I can definitely recommend it. Very nice indeed. Okay then though, that's me for this time, and I will be back again with another bit of the Scottish camper van trip next time. And until then, take good care of yourself, keep nice and busy, and I will see you again very soon. Okay then, bye.